Hello everyone and welcome to the first video on my channel. I'm the Geopolitics Guru, and my goal is to bring you a clear and unbiased look at the political news of the day from around the world. Today we'll be taking a look at the upcoming Israeli elections on September 17, 2019. I'll introduce you to all of the major candidates, as well as where they stand on the issues. I'll also give you some background on how the government of Israel is structured, and how its elections work in general. Just one quick note. Obviously, Israel is a rather, shall we say, controversial country to many, and its relationship with the US is a very polarizing debate topic in American politics. I will present to you the positions of the political parties contesting the election only as they appear in the parties' platforms and public statements. I don't want to incite any arguments about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, so please try to keep your comments as purely analytical as possible. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get started. Like any democracy, the political power in Israel begins with its citizens. When Israelis head to the polls on the 17th, they will cast their votes not for a specific candidate, but for which political party they want to see gain seats in the Knesset. More on this in a bit. The Knesset is Israel's legislature. It is a unicameral body consisting of 120 members, known as MKs. Besides voting on and passing laws, it has two main jobs. First is electing the President of Israel. The President serves a single 7-year term and is the official head of state. He or she signs all bills into law and appoints all diplomats. In practice, however, the President is largely a ceremonial role, not unlike the Queen of England, who acts as a rubber stamp for the Knesset. The current President is Reuven Rivlin. The second main role of the Knesset is to appoint the Prime Minister. This is the head of government and where the executive power actually lies. The current Prime Minister is Benjamin Netanyahu. The President must also approve of the Knesset's choice for Prime Minister, but this is almost always a formality. The Prime Minister appoints and oversees all cabinet ministers, government agencies and activities, and the military. Back to the Knesset. MKs are elected in a single constituency party list proportional election. Let's break that down. Single constituency means that there are no voting districts or local representatives. The 120 MKs all represent the nation as a whole. Party list means that instead of voting for a specific candidate, Israelis vote for the political party they like the best. And finally, proportional means that a party will win seats roughly equal to the percentage of the vote they receive. For example, winning 25% of the vote results in winning 30 Knesset seats. As long as a party receives at least 3.25% of the vote, they will win seats in the Knesset. This low threshold makes it very easy for smaller parties to win seats, and for new parties to form. As a result, the Knesset can have MKs from upwards of a dozen parties or more. This stands in stark contrast to America's two-party system. So just how does the Knesset appoint a prime minister? Well, to start, if one party wins over half of the Knesset's 120 seats, then that party's leader automatically becomes prime minister. However, this has never happened in all of Israel's history, and likely won't anytime soon. Instead, several parties must come together to form a coalition that can command a majority of 61 plus seats. After an election, the leaders of every party that won seats in the Knesset meets with the president and recommends whom they think should be tasked with forming a coalition. They will usually recommend a leader of one of the larger parties. To be as non-partisan as possible, the president will almost always choose the leader of the party which won a plurality of seats. The chosen party boss will then get to work trying to get other parties to join their coalition. They will often offer other party leaders a cabinet post or promise to adopt some of their policies. If a coalition is formed before the given deadline, then the president's designee will ascend to the office of prime minister and will form a government. If they fail to do so, the president can task a new party leader with forming a coalition, or the Knesset can vote to dissolve itself and force a new election. Elections in Israel are scheduled to occur every 4 years, however they have almost always occurred early due to how fragile the Knesset is, and how hard it is to maintain a governing coalition. Due to infighting among coalition partners, it is very common for a party to decide to leave the coalition. This may cause the coalition to lose its majority. When this happens, it triggers early elections. Since the government won't be able to get any laws or policies passed without a majority, the Knesset will vote to dissolve and hold a new election. Now that you have all the background information, let's move on to the current situation. In late 2018, the governing coalition fractured due to disagreements over a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza, and whether the ultra-Orthodox should be exempt from Israel's mandatory military service. Early elections were set for April 9, 2019. After the campaigning ended and the votes were counted, the Knesset came out looking like this. This seemed like a close victory for Netanyahu. His party won the most votes by a slim margin, and ideologically similar right-wing parties won a combined 65 seats, more than enough for a majority. However, similar disagreements over the military and the eligibility of the Orthodox for the draft caused negotiations between Netanyahu and the other right-wing parties to stall. If Netanyahu couldn't form a coalition before May 29, then President Rivlin would choose a new party leader to form a coalition. This would have likely been blue and white leader Benny Gantz, Netanyahu's main rival, whose party came in a very close second place. In order to block Gantz from getting the chance to form a coalition, Netanyahu introduced a bill in the Knesset to have it dissolve and force another election. The bill passed by a vote of 74 to 45, with one MK absent. The election was scheduled for September 17. Now let's take a look at each party vying to win seats in the Knesset on September 17, and where they fall on the ideological spectrum. The left-right divide in Israeli politics is largely dominated by the Palestinian conflict. The left tends to favor compromise and negotiation with the Palestinians. It seeks to decrease the number of Jewish settlements in the West Bank and is generally supportive of a two-state solution. Left-wing parties also tend to be socially and fiscally liberal as we know it in the U.S., favoring things such as LGBT rights and the expansion of government assistance programs. The Israeli right is generally wary of a two-state solution, supports maintaining or expanding Jewish settlements in the West Bank, and is more willing to use military force. Right-wing parties also tend to be socially and fiscally conservative, favoring things such as anti-abortion laws and less government involvement in the economy. The largest party in the Knesset is Likud, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Likud won 35 seats in the last election. It currently holds 38 due to merging with Kolanu, a small center-right party in July. Likud is split between hard-line and more moderate right-wing views. Most party members oppose Palestinian statehood and military disengagement from Gaza. However, there are some who support this disengagement and are open to a demilitarized Palestinian state. Likud supports continued development in existing Jewish settlements in the West Bank. Support for building outside of these existing blocks is not very strong among most Likud members. The party is fiscally conservative and endorses many free market principles. It supports lower taxes, free trade, and privatization of many government services. A central focus of Likud's campaign has been touting Netanyahu's experience with foreign affairs, showcasing his relationships with Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Narendra Modi. In an attempt to appeal to more right-wing voters, Netanyahu has also promised to begin annexing certain Israeli settlements in the West Bank into Israel proper. Overall, Likud sits between center-right and right-wing on our spectrum. Blue and White is currently Israel's second-largest party, with 35 seats. It is led jointly by Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid. It is actually an alliance of three parties who decided to run together. These are Israel Resilience, Yesh Atid, and Telem. Blue and White wants to re-enter negotiations with the Palestinian Authority to reach a peace agreement. They also want to limit West Bank settlements. Blue and White also wants to amend Israeli laws to better include minorities, limit religious authority over marriage, invest in early childhood education, and expand access to healthcare. The alliance has said it will not join a coalition with Netanyahu due to ongoing corruption allegations against him, but it is open to working with Likud if they replace Netanyahu as leader. Blue and White describes itself as Big Tent, and it falls in the center on our spectrum. The Joint List is an alliance of four Arab Israeli parties. It is led by Ayman Odeh. The four-member parties are Balad, Hadash, Ta'al, and Ra'am. The parties ran as two separate partnerships in the last election, with Hadash Ta'al winning 6 seats and Ra'am Balad winning 4. The joint list is ideologically diverse, with factions including socialists, communists, fundamental Islamists, and Arab nationalists. The joint list is concerned with securing rights and funding for Israel's Arab minority. It supports a two-state solution and is against Jewish settlements in the West Bank. The alliance will not join a coalition with Likud. It is open to negotiations with Blue and White, but will not join a coalition with them either. While it officially describes itself as Big Tent, the majority of joint list members are between left-wing and far-left. Shas and United Torah Judaism are parties which represent Israel's ultra-Orthodox Jewish population. Shas represents the Orthodox of Middle Eastern and North African origin, while UTJ represents the Orthodox of European origin. Both won 8 seats in the last election. Shas is led by Ari Yaderi, and UTJ is led jointly by Yaakov Litzman and Moshe Gafni. While both are socially conservative, they are open to compromise on economic issues and have joined left-wing coalitions in the past. Both support Netanyahu for prime minister and will not join a coalition led by Blue and White due to disagreements with its leadership. Both parties are strong supporters of Zionism, and are thus generally considered to be right-wing. Yamina is an alliance of the New Right and the Union of the Right-Wing Parties, which itself is an alliance of the Jewish Home and Tikuma. It is led by Ayelet Shaked. In the last election, the Union of the Right-Wing Parties won 5 seats, and the New Right was just under the threshold at 3.22%. After the election, an MK defected from Likud, increasing Yamina to 6 seats. Yamina opposes the establishment of a Palestinian state and wants to expand settlements throughout more of the West Bank. It wants to fully extend Israeli sovereignty to the region as well. Economically, it is similar to Likud in supporting free market principles. The alliance wants to decrease government intervention in the economy and create a competitive market environment. It also wants to enact economic and medical protection for the disabled and the elderly. Yamina supports Netanyahu for prime minister. Politically, the alliance falls between right-wing and far-right. Labor Gesher is, unsurprisingly, an alliance between Labor and Gesher. In the last election, Labor won 6 seats and Gesher finished below the threshold at 1.73%. It is led by Amir Peretz and Orly Levy. While it supports a two-state solution, its primary focus is on socio-economic issues. Labor Gesher wants to increase the minimum wage, provide affordable public housing and free education, and increase funding for public healthcare programs. Labor supported Blue and White forming a coalition after the April election. The alliance is center-left, similar to the Social Democratic parties of Europe. Yisrael Beitenu is led by Avigdor Lieberman, and it won 5 seats in the last election. The party supports a two-state solution, but not in the traditional sense. It wants to swap Israeli land with a majority Arab population for Palestinian land with a majority Jewish population. It supports preemptive military action against Hamas and other opponents of Israel. Its economic policy is broadly fiscally conservative and in line with that of Likud and Yamina. Yisrael Beitenu is considered a force for secularism in Israel, and it opposes the religious policies of the Orthodox parties. Party refused to join Netanyahu's coalition in April due to his complacence with the Orthodox party-supported policy of ultra-religious citizens being exempt from the draft. Yisrael Beitenu has stated it will only support a unity coalition with Likud and Blue and White. Despite its differences with the other right-wing parties, Yisrael Beitenu is generally considered to lie between center-right and right-wing. The Democratic Union is an alliance of Meretz, the Green Movement, and the Israel Democratic Party. Meretz won 4 seats in the last election, and the other member parties are new. The Democratic Union supports a two-state solution and freezing construction of Jewish settlements in the West Bank. It supports LGBT rights, environmentalism, and the creation of a social democratic welfare state. It is led by Neitz on Horowitz, who has stated that the Democratic Union will not join a Netanyahu coalition under any circumstances. Meretz supported Blue and White forming a coalition back in April. The alliance is a left-wing bloc. Otzma Yehudit was part of the union of the right-wing parties for the April election, but left to run on its own. It does not currently hold any seats in the Knesset. Otzma supports the full annexation of the West Bank, and complete Israeli rule between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. It is also against any negotiations with the Palestinian Authority. It seeks to ease restrictions on the Israeli Defense Forces rules of engagement. It opposes abortion and LGBT rights. It is led by Michael Ben-Ari, who supports Netanyahu for prime minister. Finally, it must be noted that the party has faced accusations of racism against Arab Israelis, from both within Israel and the international community. The party disputes these claims. Otzma is a far-right party. The last major party involved in the election is Zehut, which came up short in the April election with 2.74%. If the Democratic Union can be likened to the US's Green Party, then Zehut can be likened to the Libertarian Party. It supports the legalization of marijuana and endorses free market economics. It is also supportive of a one-state solution. In early September, Zehut agreed to a deal with Likud to withdraw from the election in exchange for its leader Moshe Feiglin serving as a minister in Netanyahu's government. The deal also stipulated that Netanyahu's government adopt some of Zehut's economic and cannabis reform policies. Zehut defines itself as a right-wing party, despite its differences with the other traditionally conservative parties on issues such as marijuana. So, now that we've taken a look at how the Israeli government and Israeli elections work, as well as who the major players are in the upcoming election, you may be asking yourself, who will win? To answer that, let's start by looking at some recent opinion polls. The following graph shows how many seats each party is projected to win based on polls, ranging from the date of the Knesset's dissolution to the date of this video's upload. Likud and Blue and White are in a close race for the largest party, both hovering around the low to mid-30s. Every other party is in the mid to high single digits, polling between 4 and 10 seats. The parties supporting Likud to lead a coalition, namely Likud itself, Shas, UTJ, Yamina, and Otzma, are polling at a combined 57 to 58 seats. While the parties supporting a Blue and White coalition, namely Blue and White itself, Labor Gesher, and the Democratic Union, are polling at a combined 43 to 45 seats. If the joint list will not join any coalition, and Yisrael Beitenu will only join a unity coalition, then it seems like negotiations will likely reach the same impasse as before. Unless either group can outperform the polls and win more than 60 seats, the only plausible path forward may be a unity government. Remember how I mentioned earlier that Netanyahu is facing criminal corruption charges? Hearings for these charges are scheduled for October. If coalition negotiations drag out until then and he is formally charged, Netanyahu will most likely be forced to resign as Likud leader. This could potentially open the door for a unity coalition between Blue and White, Likud under new leadership, Yisrael Beitenu, and maybe others as well. But in the end, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Thank you so much for watching my first video. Please like, share, and subscribe for more videos on the political news of the day from around the world. My next videos will be about the upcoming elections in Canada, and results and analysis of the Israeli election. I also have future videos planned on the current situation with Brexit in the UK, the protests in Hong Kong, and the politics of France, India, Japan, Germany, and many more. Thank you all so much again, and I will see you next time.